Okay, guys, let's go ahead and kickstart off today's topic. We'll once again start off with a question to the crowd. Do you have any friends?
Some.
Now, notice this says friends, not followers. I know we're all leaders and have followers online, some in the hundreds, some in the thousands, and some in the 100,000s, right? But today we're going to talk about friends. Do you have any friends? So here we heard some. How about you kids up here? Do you have any friends? Yeah, okay, good. And if you don't have friends, you guys at least have me, right? I'll be your friend. Talk to me after. We'll have a solid friendship. How many friends do you guys have?
2.5.
2.5? 2 tall ones and 1 midget? Okay. Throw out some numbers. Do we have 10 friends? 20 friends? More? Maybe 100?
Less.
Do you have 100 friends? Yeah? Okay, good. How about best friends? Do we all have best friends? How many of those do we have? I notice here we have 1, maybe 2, maybe 5 at most, right? That's really pushing it. We don't have 100 best friends, right? What's their name? What's your best friend's name? Yes? Christina? Nice. Vina, what's your best friend's name? Mark Buzhikov. Awesome. It's Alan's best friend. You guys have a lot in common. Yes? What was it? Maribella? Mirabella. Wow, that's a very, is that a French girl? It's a very exotic name. Okay. So yeah, I'm sure we have some best friends. And we don't really have as many best friends as we have friends, right? But here's a question. What turns a friend into a best friend? How did that process happen? How did one of your friends become your best friend?
When you don't have any friends, you have only one. By default.
By default, you might just have one friend and that immediately becomes your best friend. Now, you guys are probably somewhat alike, right? You probably have something in common with your friends. Is that right? You have more in common with your best friend than you do with all of your other friends, I'm guessing. Does that sound right? Because, Vanya, you have probably more in common with Mark Buzhikov than you do with somebody else that lives on your street, right? Is that right? Okay. Well, you know what? Sometimes we don't always have to have the same thing alike. Even animals have best friends. And we see this displayed throughout the animal kingdom. Here we see a dog and a ducky being best friends. We see a bear and a lion and, some kind of monkey and a pigeon. And that even though they don't look alike, they can still be friends. And there's even this one story about these 3 best friends. This is Leo the lion, Baloo the bear, and Shere Khan the tiger. Yeah, so from the Jungle Book, right? So these 3 were actually confiscated from, a really bad guy's house when they were very little, tiny cubs. And now they live together in an animal sanctuary. And now they're best friends. So today's topic, friendship. What does friendship actually mean? Do you guys know? What do you guys think it means? We have 100 friends, but we don't know what friendship means. Well, here's what the dictionary defines it as. It's a special relationship between people who enjoy being together. See, it's not just a relationship. It's a special relationship. And you won't want to be friends with someone you don't enjoy being with, right? If it's someone you just met on the street, like you said hi, you said bye, but if you don't enjoy being with them, you might not be really friends with them. So the common factor of all friends is that they enjoy being with each other. You guys enjoy being with your friends, right? You like spending time with them, right? Yeah. I mean, that's hardly a revelation. Okay, here's another question. What binds friends together? For these 2 guys, it's being buff, right? You can barely kind of see that. But very 2 strong men. They see each other, hey, you're strong, I'm strong. We're friends, let's be friends, right?
Let's be Armstrong.
Let's be Armstrong. But what binds friends together? What makes your friend your friend?
Understanding.
Understanding, okay, yeah.
Have something in common.
Something in common. Exactly. In fact, I've kind of broken it down into these three categories. Having common interests, common experiences maybe, or even common goals. There has to be something in common for us to have friends. If we just notice, again, like I said, some guy down the street, we barely know them, hardly we're going to be friends with them. So maybe you guys are into the same kind of music, or the same kind of style, or maybe, working out like those two guys. Or maybe you had similar experiences growing up, like, we had Leo the lion, Baloo the bear, Shere Khan the tiger. They both grew up together, and now they're friends even to this day. Or maybe common goals. You're growing up and you're thinking, I really want to be an acrobat in the circus. And you meet some other guy and he wants to be an acrobat in the circus. You see him, hey, and now we're friends. We have these common goals. Let's be friends together. And we all know this, right? We have friends and we know we have something in common. Okay, one more question. How did you choose your friends? Does anyone want to share an experience how they made a friend? Danny, what you got? Oh, sorry. Mark, what you got?
So we went to the first day of church, I met him,
Okay. And then what happened?
and then we noticed we had the same names.
Nice. So that's what you had in common, the same name, Mark, right? You're a Mark, he's a Mark. Came to the same church, and you're like, hey, your name's Mark, my name's Mark. We're the same church, we should be friends. So that's how it happened, right? Okay, yeah.
I remember something this. We went to school. I remember in first or second grade, we went to the playground and we liked playing monkey bars, and we were doing a race, and we both did a tie.
And you guys both tied? Was this you and Maribel?
Mirabella.
Maribel.
Mirabella.
Mirabella. It's a French name, I'm telling you. French-Russian, yes. How'd you meet your friend?
How I made a friend when he was in school, then teacher, Miss Bernanke said that we were gonna go to a break room, then me and Christina met, and we both say hi, then Christina said, can you be my friend, because she don't have another friend. Then we started calling each other, and she became, and we became like best friends, because we used to be in break hours all the time, and we always had fun together.
Nice, yeah, that's really cool. So I'm sure if we think back on how we made our friends, we can remember that moment and think to ourselves, wow, that was a really special moment. I want to share my special moment, how I made a really good friend. When I was growing up, I was about 4, 5, 6 years old, I had a very special friend. Now this friend, I barely even knew what he looked like. Here's a good example of how we socialized while growing up. So this was a friend who lived across the fence from me. And his name was Zach, right Alan? That was his name?
Yep.
Yeah. And this is how we socialized. I looked through a little hole in the fence and I said, hey Zach, and he said, hey Jesse, and we talked and communicated through our friends. Now, I was still learning English at the time and I didn't fully understand everything he was saying, and he didn't understand everything I was saying. For example, I remember when my mom went to the store and we were home alone, he was like, hey, where'd your parents go? And I was like, oh, my mom's at the magazine. Because I thought magazine for store, right? So I said, oh, magazine. And he was like, wow, your parents are famous? Like, they're in a magazine? Wow. So we didn't really understand each other all the time. He thought we were famous or something, but nonetheless, we were best friends. We didn't see each other much, and that's pretty much how we communicated, and we would spend hours just talking through the fence about anything and everything. And even though I could hardly see him, we had something in common, and it was a fence. And that was the foundation of our relationship. See, it's very interesting that when it comes to making friends, sometimes we don't consciously choose them. Sometimes they choose us. Like you said, right? You said your friend came up to you and said, hey, let's be best friends. And you said, okay, we'll be best friends. Or maybe some of us are thinking back to how we made friends and we think, it just happened. I can't really remember exactly what led to that. His name was Mark, my name was Mark. We came to the same church and boom, now we're friends. It just happened. Very much how it did with me and Zach. It just kind of happened. And I'm sure many of you have very similar stories with your friends as well. So here's the question of the day. How does God view friendship? What do you guys think?
It's a very important thing.
It's a very important thing. Would you guys agree that friendship is a very important thing? Yeah. If we don't have friends, we'd feel kind of lonely, right? We'd feel alone. We might feel like, not able to really enjoy a lot out of life. So let's see what the Bible says about friends. Yes, you have a question? There's one way of putting it. She said, if you don't have friends, maybe your best friend is your dad or your mom. And at least that's one or two more friends than some people have in this world. There's orphans who don't have parents. And those orphans still need to make friends somehow to somehow get by in this life. So let's see what the Bible tells us about friends and how we should act when we're near them. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Here we see a command, not a suggestion, not a consideration, a command from Jesus Christ to love our friends. And there's no greater love, it says, than one is ready to lay down one's life for one's friend. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we need to die for our friends and that nothing is greater? No, of course not. To lay down our life means we need to dedicate it in service to our friends, to help our friends, to be able to be available for our friends, and even when we're busy or when we're doing something for ourselves, that we are ready to lay down our life, our time, and priorities for our friends, and that is considered great love.
To make them best friends.
To make them best friends, right? Just like Jesus did. See, he says, love each other as I have loved you. He came down from his spot in heaven down to earth, and he served all of us because he loved us so much. Okay, so we understand that God wants us to have a special relationship with certain people. That's what friendship is, right? It's a special relationship. But beyond that, we need to love them. Not just hang out with them, not just have a good time together, but do we think about this? That when a friend calls and say, hey, let's go hang out together, and the first thing that comes to my mind, yes, I can't wait to lay down my life for you. All right, that sounds great. Probably not. We probably first think of, well, wait a second. What do I get out of it? See, God doesn't want us to just have friends. He wants us to love and serve them. But we immediately think, what do I get out of having friends? What does a friendship bring me? Yet Jesus says, you have to lay down your life for your friends. And there's no greater love than this. Something to think about. Today we're going to look in the Old Testament at an example of a good group of friends. Because we all know there can be bad friends, right? Yes, I think we all know, we probably have all had our experience of what bad friends look like. But today we're going to look at friends who were good and can maybe teach us a valuable lesson today. And, at the risk of sounding like a Disney movie, today we're going to learn about the true meaning of friendship. Sound good? All right. Today we're going to look at these people. Who is pictured here? Today we're going to look at Daniel yet again. We kind of took a look earlier today at the book of Daniel at an earlier sermon. Now we're going to look at it again, but from a little bit different perspective. We're going to try and discern what made Daniel and his friends so noteworthy for us today. So who was Daniel? Who was this guy? You know, he was just a kid growing up in the land of Judah. And as he was growing up, his land was besieged. So imagine you're growing up and you're living in the land of Sacramento, and all of a sudden Oregon comes in and just takes over and says, California, you're now Oregon. And we're taking everybody out and we're moving you out of Sacramento. And that's what happened to Daniel. He did not know it at the time probably, but God was punishing Israel. He was removing his protection from Israel, from Judah, and he delivered it to the king Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And Daniel was one of the prisoners of war that was carried off into a brand new land. He was living, doing his thing, playing with his friends, enjoying his life, and at a sudden moment, he was snatched away and taken away to a brand new land. So this is what we're going to read about. And as he was taken away, the king of that brand new land made a certain decree. He said to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. And he was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So the king decides, out of all these prisoners of war, all these people that he just snatched up from the middle of their city, middle of them doing their daily thing, he took them away and says, I want to handpick, cherry pick some young men that would be ideal for palace service. And not just any young men, but handsome, smart, non-defective, and very qualified. So he looks at this enormous crowd of people that he just brought over from Israel, and he picks out a very few selection. And among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. So imagine, Mark, you get taken away from Sacramento, and you're brought to Oregon, and says, Mark, your name is no longer Mark, it is now Stephen. Your name is now Stephen. Just like that. You know? And that's exactly what happened to Daniel here and a bunch of people. They were living their daily lives, snatched away, brand new land, and now a brand new name. And Daniel was one of those young men that made the cut to be potential to serve in the palace. Now earlier today we heard what would happen, right? Daniel and his friends were offered to eat from the king's table, as that was part of their royal training, their royal requirement. But Daniel and his newly found friends made the decision to not defile themselves, to not eat from the table of the king, to not drink his wine. And they decided to only eat clean vegetables and drink water instead of the king's wine. Here's what they did. They said, we will not do what it is you're requiring us to do. But you know, not all of the young men who were chosen picked that path. There were many who said, well, wait a second, the king's table? The king himself? Well, whenever am I going to get a chance to eat from the king's table? Of course I'm going to eat it. And I don't know, the Bible doesn't say the number that were chosen. It might have been 10 people, it might have been 100, it might have been 1,000. But all the Bible describes is there's 4 people who said, we will not eat from the king's table. Daniel and 3 others made the decision to not defile themselves. And let's read what happens next. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. They chose a vegan diet. Aline, I'm sure you approve. Amen. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, so 3 years they did this kind of training, the chief official presented all of these young men to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, or in our words, interviewed them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. These 4 guys proved themselves to be the only ones worthy. Out of the, again, we don't know how many, it could have been hundreds. Only 4 made the cut. And the Lord blessed them, we read, with knowledge, understanding, learning, wisdom, and absolutely no one else was able to be compared to them. So they were the only ones chosen for the king's service. Daniel and his friends went against the crowd and came out on top. The crowd were his own peers, people his age, people that looked as good as him, people that were non-defective and probably grew up on the same street. And those people, that crowd, looked at the king's table and said, whoa, we've never had a chance before to eat in the palace of maybe the greatest kings and the greatest kingdoms in the world at that time. And we'll probably never have this chance again. So imagine, you're brought to the White House and the president says, here you guys, come eat with me. You can have all the McDonald's you want, all the fried chicken you want, and you're looking at it and your tummy's going, but your mom told you back at home, we shouldn't eat that food. That food's bad for you. And only Daniel and 3 friends remembered that. Now the crowd, here's what they thought. They thought that when they were going to eat at the table, they were going to please the king. The king ordered, the king commanded. So they thought by listening to the king, they were going to please him. And they thought that they were going to be having a better chance at that royal position. In fact, they probably even laughed at Daniel and his friends, saying, how could you choose to be a vegetarian when there's all these exotic meats at the table? How can you choose to drink water when there's the best wine in the world literally right in front of you? The other young men probably thought that, since most of them were doing it. Since the whole crowd went after it, they thought it must be okay. And they're prisoners now. They've been led away from their land. They really don't have a choice. They have to do what their king tells them to do. But Daniel and his friends, they made another choice. Here's the choice they made. They won't follow the crowd. They will follow God instead. And their decision made them win in this case. They got the position that the other ones thought they were going to get. Daniel and his 3 friends were the ones chosen, not the other guys. So here's the question. Friends need something in common, right? We talked about this. We have something in common with our friends. What common interest bound Daniel and his newfound friends? Was it being a vegetarian? Was it maybe being a Jew? It's an interesting question. We will tackle this question again down the road. So Daniel and his friends are chosen for the royal service. Let's read what happens next. In the 2nd year of his reign, the king Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So the king summoned magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me. and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." So now imagine yourself in Daniel's position. You just got interviewed for a brand new job. This is your first job. Tell your boss what dream he had, and then tell him what the dream meant. That's what we call an impossible mission. That's absolutely impossible. We barely even remember our dreams when we wake up. Now imagine telling somebody else what their dream was and interpreting it and telling it what it meant. But that's the mission the king decided. He decided he wasn't going to tell anyone what the dream was. He wanted them to tell him what the dream was and interpret it. Interesting. So the astrologers answered, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among the humans." What the king asks is too difficult, they say. No one can reveal it but the gods, they say. And you know what? By saying this, these astrologers, magicians, enchanters, they basically shot themselves in the foot. What they're admitting to is that they have no access to the gods. For they said it was the gods that can, maybe interpret the dreams. But hold on, aren't they magicians? Aren't they astrologers? Aren't they supposed to be considered very powerful? And yet they cannot complete this mission. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. See, Daniel and his friends, they were taken into the royal palace, and they were considered wise men now. They were supposed to serve the king, so now they too had to carry the punishment. When Ariok, the commander of the king's guards, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Ariok then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. And during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. The king is angry. Here he is, Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful king of the most powerful kingdom of the world at that time, and his collection of wise men totally useless. No one can reveal the dream to the king. So Daniel faces a problem. And when he faces this problem, where does he go? He comes to his friends. Out of the entire kingdom, out of all the people there, Daniel comes to his friends. Have we ever came to our friends with a problem?
Yes.
Has that ever happened? Yeah. One person can admit it. That's humility right there. Yeah, I think, to some of us, that's even our defect, natural state. That once we come across a problem, we call up our friends and say, "Hey, let me tell you what happened. I'm facing this sort of predicament. I'm facing this problem. Can you help me out?" And Daniel does the same thing. He has these new friends that he made during this sort of imprisonment by Babylon. Daniel relies on his friends not to just hear him out, not to just listen to his problems, but to pray. And the prayer of his and his friends work. We see this because, see, these guys are connected to God and they're friends based on the concept of knowing the one true God. And Daniel knew that if he could rely on anyone for help, it's his friends, especially on the serious matter of life and death. It's his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah that can help. So God hears their prayers and reveals the dream to Daniel and reveals its meaning. Daniel goes back to the king Nebuchadnezzar and explains all the details. He shows descriptively exactly what the king dreamt of, the enormous statue, the different components of it, and how a rock came to crush the statue. Rock became a mountain. If you're interested to learn more details, read Daniel 2. And Daniel describes exactly what this dream was and what it meant and how each component of the statue resembled a different kingdom and so on and so forth. So he fulfills the mission. What is considered impossible by all the other magicians, Daniel does it with the help of his friends and with God's revelation. So the king is very pleased with Daniel. He's very pleased that one person in his kingdom was found that was able to complete this impossible mission. And he honors him with lots of gifts and a very high position in the kingdom. Daniel went from prisoner of war to almost second in command. But he didn't forget his friends who helped him get there. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Daniel blesses his friends, and he makes sure to put in a good word for them to the king so that his friends too can be uplifted and rewarded. God blessed the three of Daniel's friends, and they basically became like governors, right? So imagine, you're taken away from Sacramento, let's say Oregon, right? You're a prisoner of war, but then you go through the training, you get accepted, and all of a sudden you're made a governor. Now you go from prisoner to leader. And that's what happens with Daniel's friends. He lifts them up to a higher position. Now that's a true friend, right? Daniel rises to the top, brings his friends along with him.
Best friend.
Best friend. Exactly. Imagine that's like you winning the lottery and saying, hey, I won $10 million. Here, you can have $5 million. Here, you can have $1 million. You can have $1 million. Daniel won. He achieved something great, and he brought his friends along with him. Why? Because they helped. They were there for him. They had something in common. So Daniel comes to the royal court. But time goes on, and Daniel doesn't get to see much of his other friends. They're out there administrating and governing and, doing their job. And he stays in the royal palace. So time goes on. The king Nebuchadnezzar has another idea. The king thinks, what if I make an idol and make everyone worship it? What if I just build this enormous golden statue and make everyone bow down to it? Wouldn't that be nice? So King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, translated as in very big, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. But see, it wasn't just a statue he made. He also made a new law. He said, nations and peoples of every language, here's what you have to do. You must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down, whoever does not worship, will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. People these days are scared of new laws and vaccines and vaccine passports and all that stuff, right? I guarantee you it'll never be as scary as this. Bow down to this golden idol or you'll be burned alive. I guarantee you, you're not going to see that kind of law anytime soon. But these people saw that law back then. That was a law the king passed. If you don't bow down, you will be burned alive. Is that scary? That's kind of scary, isn't it? And he didn't just say this for his own people. Notice, it says nations and people of every language. Every single nation that was conquered and that was influenced by Babylon had to obey, or else that was it for them. And everyone did. Everyone had to. Just like you said, it was scary. A lot of people thought, it's very scary. I don't want to be burned alive. But there were some who didn't want to obey that law. See, these three guys here, they didn't eat from the king's table from the very beginning, and they weren't going to start to bow down to idols now. They weren't, because they served their God, not some gold statue. No matter what the punishment was, no matter what the king's name was, no matter if they were going to get burned alive or what, they were not going to bow down to any idols. Today, do we know of any friends who so bluntly obey God no matter the consequence? Do we know of any friends who aren't scared to stick out like a sore thumb in the crowd? Because back then, Daniel knew some friends that were exactly like that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. We're not even going to argue. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. These three guys basically tell the king off. They basically said, you know what, your majesty, respectfully, we reject you. Very nicely put, we will not listen to what you say. Imagine you come to the president. The president says, here, bow down to the statue. You say, you know what, your highness, your majesty, your presidentness, no. Plainly put, no. Daniel's friends again go against the crowd. They don't listen. They have something inside of them that stops them from following the crowd. They're not ready to compromise, no matter what. Here we see that again, they don't care what everyone else is doing. They don't care what the social norm is. They don't care how they stick out or how they look like to everyone else. To them, nothing is more important than obeying God. And we know what this story results in, right? We know this story. After the king basically gets rejected, being told off in his face, he makes that furnace 7 times hotter. He says, oh, you're not going to listen to me. Well, this fire, I'm going to crank up the heat 7 times. So imagine if it's like, 200 degrees, he makes it 1,400 degrees. He makes it very hot. In fact, it is so hot that the flames from the furnace leap out and they kill the soldiers trying to throw these 3 guys in. But Daniel's friends, they don't get burned alive. In fact, the king sees them inside the furnace totally alive. Totally just unharmed. And with them, he also sees a 4th figure, someone he describes as the son of the gods. He doesn't know what to call this being. He sees it's just absolutely extraordinary. He can't even quite place it. And we know now that more than likely it was Jesus who was with them, because in Isaiah 43 it says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And the king Nebuchadnezzar literally saw that happen. The soldiers who threw these guys in, they died from the flames. But the 3 friends, they were able to come out of the furnace alive, and they had no fiery residue on them. They didn't even smell like smoke. Not a hair was burned on their body. I remember, doing this when I was younger. We, especially in middle school, you guys remember those like Axe body sprays? That really stunk up a storm, and you put a lighter next to it, what happens? Just flamethrower, right? Burned so much hair off my arm. If you're scared of shaving, that's one way to do it. Hair burns quick. Doesn't even take a second. And it smells bad too. Hair is the first thing to get burnt. And they came out of this furnace that was 7 times hotter, and not a hair was burnt. Truly, a miracle happened to these people. And Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of these 3 guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god, except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." And then look what happens. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. 1 second ago, he was ready to burn them alive. Now, he's promoting them. How does that happen? They literally disobeyed the king, told him off to his face, disobeyed the laws, disobeyed societal norms, disobeyed what all the nations and all the people of all the languages had to do. They didn't do it, and now they get promoted? Very interesting. Going back to this question, what common interest bound Daniel and his friends? What did they find in common amongst each other? It wasn't just that they enjoyed spending time with one another, as we read definition, right? We love, friendship is a special relationship. People who enjoy spending time with one another. What was the common interest?
Fear of God.
Exactly. It was love and obedience to God. That was the glue that stuck them together. It was love for God. It was their blunt obedience. It was their zealousness of prioritizing God above everyone else, everything else, even if it meant that they're going to reject the king, even if it meant they're going to get burnt alive, even if it meant dying for this principle that serving God is more important than serving people, serving ideas, serving presidents, kings, maybe neighborhoods or nations or people of our own street. What was the result of this common factor? Were they punished?
Yes.
Some were. Yeah, they were punished. They were thrown into the fiery furnace. Later we read Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. We read the punishment happens with serving God, but then what happens right after? The king promotes them. God blessed them. When Daniel and his friends decided not to eat from the king's table, God blessed them. When his 3 friends decided not to bow down to this idol, they were thrown into the furnace. God blessed them, kept them alive, and they got promoted, and so on and so forth. That's how God works. We will be tested in our lives, and we'll be faced with 2 decisions. Do I go with the crowd, where everyone else is, or do I stand alone? Maybe I have a friend with me, maybe not. But do I choose to stand with God, or do I choose to bow down with everyone else? What do we decide to do today? These 4 friends, they made their choices very clear. They didn't care who saw, they didn't care who noticed, they didn't care how bad they stuck out. To them, it was very important that God came first. What do we decide to do? He who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. See, we have choice of friends. Even though I lived, I had that friend, over the fence, no one made me be friends with him. Or maybe you, Mark, right? You met another guy named Mark, you came to the same church, but no one said, Mark, you better be friends with Mark. We choose our friends. We see we have something in common, and we like them, and we draw close to them, draw near to them, and we make this decision. Unless, we're doing group projects at school, and the teacher places us with that kid we don't like and says, you have to do this group project, then we don't have a choice. Then we have to be friendly. We have to play nice. But our friends, we choose. And if we choose fools, we will suffer harm. In other translations, it says destruction. If you choose bad friends, you will have very bad things happen to you. If you choose wise people, good friends, people who obey God, their wisdom will rub off on you and you will grow wise. These three friends we read about were making wise decisions together, but they appeared as fools to everyone else. The other people who ate off the king's table probably laughed. Said, here, you're going vegan? Like we have all these meats, all these steaks, and you're not choosing to eat that? And you might say, hold on. It's just friends. It's not a big deal. I'm friendly with everyone. I've heard people say this, and I'm friendly with everyone. Or maybe something like this. I accept my friends as they are. They might be bad, but I'm still good. I've heard people tell me this, and you know what? The Bible has an answer to these questions as well. Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals. If you're driving a car and it requires gas, but you pour in apple juice, the car's not going to go very far. It might be a good car, it might be a Ferrari, it might be, maybe a McLaren, $1 million car, but if you put in something bad into it, it's not going to drive. If you are in a bad company, no matter how good you might consider yourself to be, you will be ruined. Yes, do you have a question?
Last time we went to Richard's, like little Sunday school I had before. We had like a project, like 2 weeks ago. We had like a couple, like 3 or 4 apples, and we put a bad apple in there. It had like a worm in it, and in 1 week it turned into all bad apples.
What a very good example. Thank you. A bad apple ruins the whole crop. Exactly. You might have 100 good apples. You put in one bad one with a little ugly worm in it. Guess what? It affects all the rest of them just the same. Thank you for that example. It's very good. Bad companies, bad apples, bad people will ruin you. Do not be deceived. Do not think that you're above this word. This word affects you as much it affects me 100% of the time. If Daniel and his friends ate from the table of the kings, they wouldn't be written about in the Bible. Probably not. Much like we don't know the names of the other ones, we don't even know how much there were of them. We don't know the number. Why? Not important. They're part of the crowd. They're part of the world. They're part of everyone else. And you know what? There's millions of those kinds of people. Billions. If Daniel's friends obeyed the law of King Nebuchadnezzar and bowed down, he said, you know what? Just this once, that furnace is kind of hot, kind of scary. Today, just today I want to save my own skin. I'm going to bow down. We wouldn't have heard much from them anymore. Which brings me to my next point. What is this?
Chameleon.
It's a chameleon. What's a chameleon? What's a chameleon? Yeah. So chameleon's distinctive trait is it can change the color of its skin to blend with its surroundings, right? Yeah, so we see that it's happening here. Some very, tropical flowers, different kinds of colors, and the chameleon changes its own colors to blend in with the environment. You ever meet people who are social chameleons?
Yes.
Yeah,
A lot.
a lot. Maybe more than we'd want to. In today's crowd, they act like this. In tomorrow's crowd, they act another way. And they try to blend in with the crowd. What the crowd wants, they'll deliver it. Why? Because they want to blend in. They don't want to stick out. But you know, all of us, people, in a way, can exhibit these traits of a social chameleon. We take on the colors of our surroundings. What we surround ourselves with, we will start showing. So the question is, who do we surround ourselves with? We're a product of our environment. Have we heard this before? A product of our environment. See, it's very, very, very hard to be like Daniel, like Hananiah, like Mishael, like Azariah. It's very hard to stand out when nations are bowing down. I'm not talking about a group of, like where there's 20 of us here. I'm talking thousands, maybe millions. And out of those millions, only 4 made the right decision. You know what? You know why people don't do that? Because here's what they think. The crowd might eat us alive. The king might throw me in the furnace. I might get an owie. I might have to suffer a little bit if I stand out. It'd be much easier to look like this and blend in so no one sees how much I stick out. Many choose the crowd instead of what they know is right, just like those other youths did. They came from Israel. They were all brought up the same as Daniel and his friends. They all knew the same things. They went to the same church. They listened to the same sermons. They knew the law of Moses. They knew. Their background was no different. But they chose the king's table. You know why? Because the majority did. If they're doing it, why shouldn't I? What's wrong with it? It's just food, right? Nations of people look to their left, look to the right. Hey, he's bowing down, she's bowing down. I better bow down too. I don't want to get thrown in the furnace. And they did. Do we associate with these kinds of people? I hope not. I hope we associate with these kinds of people that we're going to talk about next. What does this look like?
Sword.
Burning stick, a sword, yes. What was that? I can't hear. Huh?
Lava.
A lava. No, not quite. Yes. Okay, close. Mark, what you got? A flame sword. Okay, I'll just tell you guys. So this is a crude material that's being worked into something. So we see 2 things here, right? We see a hammer. We see where the hammer is, right? We know what a hammer looks like and something's happening. And then we see another thing, a rod, a crude piece of material that's being worked into something. Something is being done. Something is being hammered out. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Here we see iron being worked on by other iron. And these are the kind of friends the Bible calls us to seek. The Bible says find those groups of people that don't help you blend in, but that help you being formed into something brand new as iron sharpens iron. The Bible calls us to seek out friends that make us sharp, that make us into a tool that can be used. So the question is, do my friends sharpen me or do they make me dull? Do they make me into a sword Or do they make me into a rubber band that can't be used for anything? And then here's another question. Do I avoid the friends who sharpen me because I'm afraid of sparks? Sparks hurt. Being thrown into a fiery furnace hurts. Well, not for them. Actually, they were unharmed, but they didn't know that. Being sticking out, outside of the crowd and sticking out like a sore thumb is uncomfortable. And most of the times, your friends will tell you not to do that. Hey, don't stick out. Be like us. Be like the rest of us. We're all dull. We're all kind of, not sharp here. We're all just crude material. Be like the rest of us. And sometimes I know there might be a person or two in my life that can help me become a better person, that can transform me, but I'm scared of those sparks. I'm scared for those rough edges to be smoothed out. Sparks aren't pretty. It means there's a rough edge literally being hit on. Is that something we're ready for? Remember when I asked, when we think about friends, we think about what do I gain from a friendship, right? A friend calls us, hey, let's hang out, and we think, oh, I'm gonna have fun, I'm gonna enjoy myself, I'm gonna, have a good time. This is what we should be expecting. Is my friend going to hammer me out into a better person than I was yesterday? Is my friend going to teach me more about God and going to help me become a better Christian and help me stand out of the crowd, not blend in?
Should be a hammerhead friend.
A hammerhead friend, exactly. Maybe not all the time, sometimes we need soft approaches. Hammering all the time could start hurting a little bit. Sometimes a sword gets done hammered out and then it gets used as a tool. See, we have a choice. We choose our friends. Maybe it's because they have the same name. Maybe because we go to the same school. Maybe because we like the same taste in music or we work together. But what common factor should bind me and my friends? And not just the friends, the buddies you see once a week, once a month. You kind of hang out, spend an hour or two together. This is more about best friends. We have 100 friends, we have 1 or 2 best friends. Daniel, I'm sure, knew a lot of people, but the Bible really mentions those 3 other guys that he found this common factor with. What binds me to these friends? What should bind me to these friends? And as we said, it's love and obedience to God. If we don't have this common factor, we should reanalyze our friendships. Now, I'm not telling you to go out there and, cancel everyone. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you will be a product of your environment. If you see and all of your friends are bowing down, chances are you're bowing down with them. Last scripture we will read and start to wrap up. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Do not love the world. Now, when we read this verse, what do we think? This isn't talking about, think about how pretty oceans are or how lovely a forest is or, the world has its own kind of natural beauty. It's talking about specifically lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. Nebuchadnezzar said, hey, everyone bow down to my pride, to this prideful statue. Bow down to it. Look how pretty it is. A lot of people of these times bow down to different ideologies, bow down to different principles, and think they're serving God, but as we talked about last time, they're just serving an idol. Shortly put, If anyone loves their friends who doesn't love God, who doesn't love God, the love for God isn't in them. That's what we read, right? If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. If Daniel said, hey, you know what, guys? Yeah, you're my vegetarian buddies, but these guys who eat from the king's table, you're my buddies too. Let's all just kind of be together. I accept you. He would have been dissolved. He would not have maintained his integrity. Much like his three friends when they go out, nations bowed down. Nations. 3 people didn't. Why? Because they loved God. They didn't care. Do we have friends that don't care what it looks like to the rest of the world, but care what it looks like to God? The other orphans who were selected for the royal duties, they ate from the table of the king. Why? They didn't want to look dumb in front of their friends. Maybe they didn't want to stick out. They wanted to just, kind of blend in, be a social chameleon. They all knew, okay? It's not like they didn't know. They knew they weren't supposed to eat. Only Daniel and his friends said, we're not going to. Us all sitting here today, we grow up in Christian families. We have Christian principles. We read the Bible and we know certain things. But when parents aren't looking, what do? Daniel's parents weren't around. His pastors weren't around. His whole city was miles and miles away. He was alone. And he could have technically done whatever he wanted and nothing would have happened. But he chose to serve God instead. You guys know who Vladimir Lenin is? Was? Sorry. I say is because, he's still, legacy still continues. Do you guys know who that was? Vladimir Lenin? Everybody's grandpa. Grandpa Lenin. Well, Grandpa Lenin, had some wise moments in his life. And one of his wise moments, he said the following: show me who your friends are, and I will tell you what you are. He came up with this. And this quote still rings true to this day. Show me your friends, and I'll tell you exactly who you are. You don't even need to be in the same room. If Daniel came and he was out of the room, but his 3 friends were there, the king could have probably connected the dots and said, Daniel's probably like them as well. Bows down to his God, not my God. Why is it so obvious? If I bring to you, say, 5 friends, and they're all basketball players, what do you guys think I will be? Basketball player, right? Or if I bring friends and they're all just like expert musicians and they're my best friends, who will I be? Probably a musician as well. Now, what if I bring out all these friends and they're all sinners and they all engage in the world and do what is wrong? And I say, yeah, these are my best friends. What does that make me look like? The best sinner, right, of the group. I'm king of them all. No. This is very important, guys. Because we know we all have friends. We live life, we want to have friends. We want to enjoy life, and even if it's talking through a hole in the fence, we will find ways to make friends. But it is our choice who we choose. What draws us close? Is it love for the world? Or is it love for God? What's going on in this picture here? They're all pointing at, who are they pointing at? Yes, what's going on in this picture? They look like soldiers, right? Okay. Do you guys know what World War II was? A little bit, barely. Okay, so in World War II, it's a game. Now that, I've actually heard the statistics, more people have died in World War II video games than have ever even existed at that point in time. That's how crazy it is. But so in World War II, there was a really bad man. And his name was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler, much like King Nebuchadnezzar, made a law that you had to, instead of bowing down, you had to get your arm out like this and you had to hail Hitler. You had to salute him. So everyone in Germany had to do this kind of salute. Whether Hitler was there or not, didn't matter. Just by greeting someone, you greeted them by saying, "Hail Hitler." So this is in Nazi Germany, somewhat modern day worship of that golden idol. That's what it looked like. It's not that far off, guys. We think Babylon, thousands of years ago. This just happened. It's 80 years ago. Yes, Vinny.
What happens if they don't point out them and say,
Very good question. See, the law said everyone had to salute and hail Hitler. Let's take a closer look at this picture. There's one guy who didn't. You saw that?
It's probably blind.
Yeah, he's blind to this ideology. He has his arms crossed and he's defying it. He's saying, everyone else is doing it. I won't. Why? Because it's wrong. And you know what? I don't see any friends with him. I see him by himself. In fact, because of doing this, he probably lost friends. When his friends came to him and said, "Hail Hitler," he said, "Nope, hands in my pockets, I'm not going to do it." He knew it was wrong. And when it came down to showing that, and when hundreds around him did it, he didn't. Here's a promise to you guys. If you don't follow the crowd, you will lose friends. You will. But maybe that's for the best. Maybe. Because now, these people, if they're still around, if they look at this picture, they're very embarrassed. In fact, right now in Germany, it's illegal to say the word Hitler. You could go to jail just for saying the word Hitler. Because they reassess themselves, they're like, whoa, we did something very, very bad back then. We'll make sure it never happens again. If you say the word Hitler in public, off to jail you go. If you put out your arm like this, off to jail you go. So they corrected themselves. But back then, they thought it was the most right, the most correct thing you could ever do. Except for that guy. That guy knew better. And he acted on it.
He's from Russia. He's from the future.
It's from the future. I guarantee you, if you act like him, you might lose friends. I don't see any friends with him. He probably lost friends because of this. You know why? Because in the crowd, you get lost. But away from the crowd is where you get saved. If Daniel's 3 friends bowed down, their life would have been saved. But they would have broken everything with God. But God still, in His mercy, saved their lives as well from the fiery furnace. So the question, when we leave out these doors, when we go out into the week, when we hang out with our friends, we need to ask this: do I want to follow the crowd, accept what they accept, salute what they salute, or do I want to follow God? This is the question we need to ask ourselves on a daily basis. Is it more important to me to blend in, or more important to obey the truth that I know? No matter if I stick out, no matter if I get made fun of, no matter how much it might hurt, I might even be called to die for it. Daniel and his friends were ready to die. Why? Because to them it was more important to serve God. It is my hope and my wish that when we go out there, when we spend our time with our friends, this is what binds us. Love for God. We might have other common interests, music, maybe movies, maybe hanging out at the same park, maybe the same school, same name. Yes, these are all common factors that draw us in. But the most important, the heaviest, the most absolutely, most important out of everything else, love for God needs to triumph when it comes to the choices we make for who will be our friend. Let's summarize our day and wrap up. In the beginning, we heard about Daniel, and we heard about his choice of food. And we heard about how in our lives we have this choice of food today. What does my spiritual diet consist of? What the world offers? Their food? Or maybe I'm still stuck in my infant milk. I'm like on a treadmill, just kind of running but going nowhere. Or is it solid food? Revelation of the truth. Something that grows my spirit. Something that really gives me that growth and strength I need to be victorious. In the second sermon, we heard that faith without works is dead. It's non-existent. It doesn't matter what you think you know. If your faith doesn't have those works, it's dead. Daniel and his friends had faith, but it was through their works that King Nebuchadnezzar praised God. They could have said, we're Jews, we obey God. King Nebuchadnezzar said, I don't care. Bow down to my king, my idol. But it was because they didn't bow down, because they prioritized God, and because they were saved from the fiery furnace, King Nebuchadnezzar, wow, your God can save like no other gods can. Can people see my faith through my works? Not my words. Not my, ideologies. Not my posts. Not my bios. Everyone wants to write God first in their bio. But what about through my works? Last but not least, what draws me to my friends? What is the glue holding us together? Is it love for the world or love for God? Let's look and choose our friends wisely so that we don't suffer harm, so that we don't suffer destruction, but grow wiser and sharper in the Word of God. Yes, sparks may fly. Iron sharpens iron, but at least we will walk away the better for it. Amen.